Today, my wife and I are visiting Colonial Williamsburg, an amazing living history museum in Virginia that tells the early part of America's enduring story. Come along with me and my wife as we explore a history buff's paradise. That's coming up next.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
52% of Williamsburg is enslaved in the 18th century.
Yeah.
And so, of course, this is a government compound, right? So government enslaved people, right, the property of the colony, they are going to be like, all of these upstairs spaces that you're going to find are usually like sleeping quarters for the enslaved people who work those spaces. So the kitchens and scullery, carriage house and stables and all these different spaces are run by enslaved people. So. Food is grown by enslaved people, houses are cleaned by enslaved people, carriages are run by enslaved people, all these different things that function here in Williamsburg. There's a good chance that enslaved folks are making this city work.
It makes you wonder if, like, the people that weren't enslaved actually had any skills to do it for themselves, you know?
Yes, because the trick is, that's because they're getting paid for it, right? So, like, if you got skills, that's because you're using those things to make money for yourself and to, yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Huh.
And don't forget, you have to be able to afford.
Yep.
Afford enslavement. Yeah, so
Indeed.
a large portion of the Virginia population are poor Virginia farmers,
Right, yeah.
who don't have the money to be able to maintain and upkeep enslaved people. So
Right.
when you think about, there are laws, there's like legal restrictions that slave owners have to clothe, feed, house, and pay taxes on enslaved people because they're the property, right? They're treated like property.
Yeah.
And so it's very expensive.
Mhm.
So if you think about one of the most affluent people here in Williamsburg, separate of any royal person, is Peyton Randolph. So if
Yeah.
you go to the Peyton Randolph house, that's the guy who has about the highest number of enslaved people here in Williamsburg. And so they talk a lot about what does that mean, right? To have enslaved people or to be enslaved here in Williamsburg.
Right.
One question I did have was, how much of interaction was there of the Native Americans with the governor here, or is it more just here you're talking about Native interactions with the residents of Williamsburg?
So when you talk about a place like Williamsburg, there are all different classes that existed in the city, right? So you have Native people who, in this particular time and place, exist much like Ireland and Scotland, right? Who are considered conquered by England, who are brought legally into the fold of English society, who have legal restrictions and protections from the crown, and they interact like everybody else, right? So they're in the markets and taverns and courthouse through their Indian agents, and they have boys down at the Rafferton Indian School and that sort of thing. And then here in Williamsburg, also constantly, you have Native folks who are considered at the same station of king and crown, who are only doing business with the royal government, right? So Cherokees, Creeks, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Uchis, Catawbas, Shawnees, Wyandots, Delawares, the Six Nations, their only business in a place like Williamsburg or Charleston or New York is with the king's appointed representative, right? So Native folks, those people who are coming in here, they're not buying anything, they're not selling anything, they're not trading in town, they're not gathering anything while they're here. They are strictly here as politicians to do business with England's politicians. That's it. So,
Interesting.
Yep.
Very interesting.
And if y'all have any questions too, we're talking a little bit about different Native people here in Williamsburg, what folks are doing, what kind of things are going on in the city, and anything else that you might be interested in. So. So they were just asking a little bit about like social classes in Williamsburg, right? So what different types of Native people are in Williamsburg, and how do they interact? Who are they interacting with, right? So it's important to keep in mind that in this time period, we always kind of hear this concept of like the Indians, right? That really doesn't exist here, right? So that's almost a uniquely American concept that comes about after the Revolution, right? So we think about here in Williamsburg, the royal governor, who tribes are constantly visiting in and out in the 18th century, he does not do any business with the Indians, right? He does not receive the Indians when they come in. He receives the Cherokee, the Creeks, the Chickasaws, the Uchis, the Catawbas, the Wyandots, the Six Nations like Seneca and Cayuga and Mohawk and Onondaga and Oneida and Tuscarora, the Pamunkey, the Mattaponi, the Chickahominy, the Nottoway, the Nansemond, the Rappahannock, right? Each of these tribes are their own separate countries with their own government, constitution, and language, and religious beliefs, and family structure, and oral traditions, and their own territory and needs and resources and population. There is no such thing as the Indians, right? And so, here in a place like Williamsburg, you have tribes like Pamunkey, Monacan, Nottoway, who are considered conquered by the crown, right? So like on the front gates of the palace, you see the lion and the unicorn. The unicorn's got a crown around its necklace and chains, right? That represents Scotland's subjugation to England. Same, very, very similar treaty that binds Ireland and Scotland to the crown, binds the local tribes here in Virginia to the crown, right? So where they can and cannot go, where they can and cannot live, who they can and cannot talk to, how much money they can make, what types of businesses they can be involved in, right? Their land and what they pay for it, right? So they are set aside a land grant by the king, and they pay a quick rent for that every year. You know, you have boys who attend the Brafferton Indian School there at William and Mary, from the local tribes and also from farther out west. But then separate of that, in the workings of this local area, you also have tribes like Cherokee or Shawnee or Wyandots, you know, and the Six Nations who are coming here and are considered to be on the same sort of social status as like king and crown, right? Who interact only with royal people, like the royal governor and his family, right? So, 4 Shawnee men that are living here in 1774 and 5 in the palace with Lord Dunmore and his family. You know, in 1722, the Cherokee delegation that travels over to London and stays with the king and queen there. The Mohawk and Six Nations delegations that go over to England and have their portraits painted with the king and the queen. All of those types of things. So you have a very sort of different idea of these people and these people. So today, they get lumped all together as the Indians, right? But again, in this time period, that concept really doesn't apply to anything. So,
So you mentioned the Brafferton Indian School. I didn't know that existed. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. So both William and Mary and Harvard are originally required to have Indian schools to open up, right, as part of their original charters. And in part, they're funded, started by the same man. His name is Robert Boyd. He's an English philanthropist, and he, in his will, sets aside some money for Christian and charitable. And that goes to fund and build the Brafferton School here in Williamsburg. So it's built in, or it started to build in late 1722. It's constructed in 1723, and boys are attending there from 1723 to 1782. Today, if you like go down to the College of William and Mary, you look at like the Wren Chapel. Just off to the left of that Wren Chapel, there's a small rectangular building. Today, it's the office of the president of the college, but in the 18th century, it's the Indian School.
So was the objective basically to Christianize the Indians or the natives?
Well, William and Mary is largely a religious school. Anyway, its main goal, as it's stated, is to produce members of the clergy. And so, of course, the school there, the charity school, is very sort of religious based. So part of their studies is to attend a Root Parish church while they're here in town, right? But it's not necessarily like the American boarding schools where it's like we're going to forcibly take kids and strip them of culture and things like that. It's, you can send boys here if you want to learn English, reading, writing, arithmetic, and then go back home to become translators and build communities to sort of build a better relationship, right? So it's an option for some people. So the local tribes, they have to keep boys in the school as part of their tribute. But Wyandots, Delawares, Cherokees, you know, all these different people who are sending boys to that school from farther out west are doing so voluntarily. And they're usually sending somebody from their community to stay with them to keep up their culture and language and things like that while they're here. So,
I was going to ask, so was the main purpose of that to enhance the relationship between the Indian and the British, or was there room for that native to then go and have a career or something beyond outside? Was there opportunity for that? Or?
Well, again, so the local tribes, they're very limited, and because they're part of English society, right? So here's the delineation. The local tribes like Pamunkey, Monik, and Nottoway are part of English society, social structure, and culture, right? Tribes like Cherokees, Wyandots, Shawnees, Creeks, and all the other what England would consider foreign tribes are not part of their social structure, and no like social concept or lens applies to those people, right? So you think about like careers or jobs, that don't mean squat to these folks, right? They got their own country, their own local governments and things like that to deal with. These folks, however, when they leave that school, they go back home and live as they're allowed to by England, right? So they hunt, they fish, they sell things and buy things. They live like 90% of Virginia, which is like poor farmers, right? So they just have a couple of more rules about like, you can only make this much money a year. You can only live in these places. You can only talk to these folks. You can't do business in the courthouse. So a lot of like the black codes, right? So as it begins the statutes here in Williamsburg, Indian, Negro, or mulatto. Those Indian folks that it mentions are the local tributary tribes, right? So that does not apply to the Western nations. So like, say for instance, a Wyandotte boy goes to the school, right? He comes in from Michigan, goes to William and Mary there, Grafton School, and then goes back home. Probably, unless he's wants to be a politician, not a lot of what he's going to learn there is going to be very useful.
Yeah.
And that's actually specifically stated, like Conestoga in 1774, he notes that when these boys return to us, they're bad runners, they don't like to be hot or cold, they're always whining about something, they don't like to go out and work, they can't build houses and things like that, they can't hunt, or they can't speak, our language as well as they should, so they're kind of behind. Right? But if you send us your boys, we'll gladly take them and educate them and then send them back to you, right? So there are some cultural concepts and things like that. So those formative years for a young boy, right? There are things that in their own communities that they should be doing, and then like here, they gotta like sit down and they gotta learn and they gotta do their things in school. But that kind of slows them down when they go back to their communities and be like, well, I can't keep up with these other boys. I can't run as fast or as far as they can. I can't, swim like they can. I can't do all the things that these other kids do. So that becomes kind of an issue. So yeah, it depends on exactly how you function, right? So the local tribes who function as part of England, right? But for the other tribes who definitely don't function as part of English society and culture, it can be hit or miss. Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap for this Colonial Williamsburg video. I hope you really enjoyed it, getting to see another part of this amazing living history museum. If you like this sort of stuff, check out my other videos. Check out colonialwilliamsburg.org to plan your own visit here, because it's so much cooler in real life than it is on film. Till next time, this is History Buff, TN Photobug signing out, and I'm having a blast with the past.